Ontario is kind of like the birthplace of an art form called woodland art, and if you guys can imagine yourself having like these spiritual X-ray goggles where you can kind of see the spirit of what it is you're looking at when you look at Indigenous artwork from around Ontario, that's sort of the lens that you need in order to understand what you're looking at. And growing up where I did up in Red Lake, little town, not a First Nation community, but about 80 people and 400 dogs, call it home. It's kind of the birthplace of woodland artwork. This man named Norval Morrisseau is kind of accredited with being the originator of the art form. And this was my first kick at the can at doing woodland artwork. And actually, thanks, my first 100% in grade 10 art class. And since then, the artwork has kind of become a little bit more refined, and I've gotten a little bit better at it. But you know what? We all have to start somewhere. And this is a throwback that I always like to throw up there just to kind of remind myself that I wasn't always good. And just for context, this is Shania Twain back in, might need to explain that. How those pants are staying up still, I'm not really 100% sure, but I was in, I think, Mr. Fretz's class, shout out Mr. Fretz, in grade 4, and I was like a little bit nervous to bring this to school because I was like, this is hot, and it might be, too much for grade 4s to handle, but I definitely didn't bring it out again for show and tell after that. Fast forwarding a little bit to kind of present day, as Oliver was saying, a graduate of Sault College. 2011 was my year, and I have to say that this institution did not look like this at the time. You guys have it good. If you can kind of see the dumpster in the back, that's sort of where I went to school. So kudos to the management team for for thinking that curb appeal is important, because it is. And now that it's 12 years later, I'm not really good at math, but I want to come back, and it's kind of cool to be here, standing in front of you guys, full circle moment, talking about my adventures in Toronto and other places in Canada. Right after graduation, as some people always, or not always get, but some people get this feeling of, if I stay one more day, I'll never leave. And I had that when I left Red Lake right after graduating high school, and then right after graduation from here, I just kind of felt like there was more out there for me to do and experience. And that place was Toronto. And I just left here with such a relentless determination to succeed. However, you do run into some bumps in the road, and should you find yourself on King Street in Toronto, just avoid these places. I used to work at one of them as a line cook, and I think it's so true. The right jobs kind of come after doing things that you really don't want to do, and I had no prior experience being a line cook. So getting burned alive by fryer grease every day is a great motivator to figuring out what it is that you actually do want to do. And as I was saying, sweating into people's food, not what I was meant to do in this world. So I had this moment of kind of clarity, and I was like, if I didn't have to show up to this job, I would have more time to do what I'm actually good at, which is like designing and painting. And I just kind of had this moment where I just changed the intention of what or remembered the intention of why I even moved there in the first place. But, and I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit. There was, some growing years before I kind of really found success in being a graphic designer and being an artist. And one of those intentional changes was early on. I kind of hid the fact that I was gay, and I also hid the fact that I was Indigenous as well. Like, I just didn't infuse it into my work, and I wasn't as public with it as I probably could have been or should have been early on. And it wasn't until I kind of really got real with those two things and infused it into the work that success kind of really started to happen. I also joined a couple chambers of commerce, which I'm so grateful that most of you guys are business students, so you understand what that is. So I joined chambers of commerce that kind of reflected myself. I could see myself in as a two-spirit Ojibwe man, and that's kind of how I was able to speak to larger multinational companies and kind of charm them into putting my artwork onto their buildings, because where I grew up, as much as there were a lot of dogs everywhere, there was also a lot of our indigenous artwork on the walls throughout the community, and then also lots of cultural events. So I could see myself reflected and got to grow up with my culture, like, surrounded by it, which as I moved further and further south, like to here and then to Toronto, I just kind of saw less of that. So one of the intentions behind the work that I started to do was putting indigenous artwork and iconography out there into the public sphere more, and align myself with places that wanted to do the same thing as well. So Village Media here in Sault Ste. Marie was one of the ones that that wanted to have some indigenous artwork on their building, and again, aligning with places that wanted to tell a story that had not really been heard that much. Pure Later being another one as well. And a lot of times the goal of working with an organization was sort of just trying to envision what the impact would be. So for Pure Later, we did Christmas boxes, or I did Christmas boxes. I make it seem like there's a lot of people that work for me, but it's just me and my assistant Fatima. However, why I wanted to work with Pure Later in the first place, because I wonder what the impact would be for a young kid receiving, a package that has their artwork on it for Christmas, or whatever it is, and what that kind of experience would do to someone, or if they even think about it later on in life. Rogers was another place that I thought was initially kind of too big and kind of too scary to work with, because when you think about, when you get your phone bill from Rogers, for instance, or your cable bill, you're like, it's annoying to have to pay those things, but you should, especially if you're in college. They're not optional. I definitely thought bills as optional way back in the day. But, however, what I kind of learned about working with larger organizations is that there are just people behind these larger corporations and companies that want to do good work and want to tell great stories, or impactful stories that hadn't really had a lot of airplay, really. So, I mean, residential schools is a really hard thing to talk about, but it's worth it being out there in the world. And it was really cool to see Rogers, just to see what they're really capable of as like a multimedia company, talking about it on not just radio, but then also television, and getting to see that machine at work was really cool. And as I was saying earlier, like getting to see my culture reflected every day back where I was from. This moment was really crazy because it's Dundas Square in Toronto, kind of like the biggest. It's Times Square for Canada. So it was really cool. And then another project where I really had to think about impact and intention was working with the Chicago Blackhawks. I love social media so much. They had reached out on Instagram, of all places, and kind of into that one section, the dark section of your DMs, where it's like, requests. And all it said was, do you want to work with a national sports team? And I'm the kind of person that just sort of like, yeah, okay, I'll bite. And then they said it was the Chicago Blackhawks, and I was like, I don't know if I want to be associated with a place with such an intense logo that kind of has a lot of, negative connotations. Like, Indigenous people we're not characters, and when you kind of cartoon us, it dehumanizes us. So I was a little leery about taking the phone call, but I did. And then after that, kind of realizing that they have a lot of integrity, and having a fandom of millions and millions of fans around the world, as the Chicago Blackhawks do, it's a big ship to try and turn, but I realized that they are trying to turn it. And it started with a land acknowledgement that plays before every home game, and then it kind of grew into doing the goalie masks for Marc-Andre Fleury. I was told by my very straight friend that you can't just call him Mark Fleury. So, shaming me for what I don't know. Big hockey fan, obviously. And then it kind of, this year, I got to do the helmet for Alex Stalick, because Marc-Andre Fleury moved on. And it was really great to see, I'm gonna go back to that. It was really great to see Indigenous culture on the ice, and shifting away from this old caricature that is of a person, and I think trying to educate their fans about, like I said, like he was a person, and kind of paying homage to the lands that are around Chicago, being First Nations and stuff. So that meant a lot to me, just because I wonder how many elders wanted to play hockey but couldn't because there was so much racism in the game, and just thought, like, I am not going to deal with that. So I kind of thought about the impact of like them getting to see Indigenous culture reflected on the ice, and there's young kids, and I have nephews as well, that are growing up and just don't know anything different than seeing themselves reflected in a positive way, which I think is again kind of the goal behind a lot of the work that I'm doing. And going even further than that, onto the international stage, getting to work with the Olympic curling team felt really cool as well, because it's not only, we're not just in America anymore, like we're international, baby, and kind of giving a playbook to other, wherever Olympics are being held after this, or any place that has an Indigenous population, why not look there to see what they have to offer that not will just make the team look good, but then also, show the world that they do care about their Indigenous cultures. And kind of anywhere that you look in the world, there definitely was or is an Indigenous culture surviving alongside. And I think inclusivity is kind of like, that's not the name of the game, like it just should just be like infused into every culture. And speaking of infusion, nice little segue there, Patrick. Getting to do also products, like it's really fun to obviously work with like larger organizations that put my artwork onto these very public stages and whatnot, but kind of getting to covertly enter people's lives through products like blankets that feel really nice. And then also stuff that you can use feels really good. Like it's a different kind of feedback when someone is wearing a t-shirt that I make, and they're like, oh, like I love this t-shirt, it's my favorite one, I feel so good in it. And that feels different than someone online kind of just being like, oh, nice mask. And again, one of the goals of the work that I do is to kind of infiltrate people's lives in these beautiful ways where, if you have a question about why does the artwork on this mug look like this? Or, if you're using a cutting board, why does it look like this? Like, just kind of, if those questions are asked, then my job is done being an artist, and I'm really out here to try and just, bring Indigenous culture to the forefront of people's minds, not in a way that is in a trying to shame people for what they don't know, because I think that's been that's been how it's been done for a while. So, and what I'm also doing is teaching folks through in person now that we're kind of almost through the pandemic, and then also virtually as well, just how to paint, because I feel like, a lot of people just sort of need creative confidence to get started. And what I always like to do is just give people a playbook on how to be creative in the first place, but then how to get from point A to point B when it comes to painting or designing. And even with business, I think, like I was saying a second ago about, shaming people for what they don't know, like Some people just need to know how to get started with prints, or, you know, where did you get your mugs done? And it's not a secret. Like, I love to tell people that because there wasn't really anyone to look up to for myself. So all of that in 16 minutes. There's a lot more, but I think I've given you guys enough. So I'm going to end it there.